Hello, my name is Diane Southard from Your DNA Guide, and this is what to do with your DNA test results in 2022, Part 3. Now, of course, since this is Part 3, it means there is a Part 2 and a Part 1. You will definitely want to watch both of those before you move on to this one, because they kind of all build on each other. So these are the different parts of this particular series: getting started with your DNA test results, digging into your DNA matches, and then now we're going to talk about what next, strategies for testing in 2022. So just as a review, in Part 1 we talked about navigation of websites, settings, how to put your trees in, how to set a good goal, as well as your ethnicity results. In Part 2, we talked about digging into your DNA matches, finding those match groups using the shared matches tool, and then understanding your generation of connection, meaning how far back in your matches tree do you need to go before you'll run into your common ancestor. So now in Part 3, we're going to talk about some strategies that you'll want to use once you've kind of had a little bit of experience grouping your matches and using that generation of connection idea. You'll want to transfer some of your DNA test results, use the Ask the Wife strategy, and do genealogy. So to transfer your DNA test results means that you take the data from one testing company and you put it into another testing company. Right now, this is probably the best and cheapest DNA testing strategy. You pay for and take the test at Ancestry, and then you transfer your results into MyHeritage, Family Tree DNA, and Living DNA for, guess what? Free. Yeah, you really can't beat free. So you can access your DNA match list for free at these companies by transferring, and then you can physically test again at 23andMe. So just to be clear, at Ancestry and 23andMe, you have to physically test with them in order to have access to their database. But these other companies, you can actually transfer. Now, what does transfer really mean? Well, it's all about your raw data. Your raw data is the actual file that's generated by your DNA testing company. It looks like this. Yeah, it's not that exciting, not really, but it is kind of interesting. And I think it helps to know what all these things mean, just in case you happen to be looking at your raw data file. So that first column is just the name of the DNA marker they tested. The second column is the chromosome where that DNA marker sits. The next column is the actual address point of where that DNA marker is. And then we finally get to your data. So you have two data points, one from mom and one from dad. However, it's not all neat and tidy in that one column is mom's and the other column is dad's. Sometimes they can swap back and forth, but those last two columns are your data. So what exactly is raw data? Well, I'm going to use a car analogy. So I don't really know that much about cars, but I do know that they have outside parts and inside parts, right? And I know, or I've learned, that the inside parts of a car are kind of the same. You have to have all of the same elements in order to make the car work. So that's how your raw data is. There's some basic elements to raw data that every testing company has. And that's why you can transfer from one company to another, because that raw data is kind of the same, right? Not exactly the same, but kind of the same. So when you transfer your data, essentially the inside parts are the same, which means it's just the outside part that changes. So by the outside part, I mean the DNA testing company's website, how they display their data, the matches that you're going to get, your ethnicity results. All of these things will be a little bit different for each testing company, but they're all based on the same raw data. So at one testing company, your outside parts of your car would look like this. At another, maybe like this. At still another, maybe like this. And a lot of times people get confused and frustrated when they have different results at different companies. But I want to reassure you, they are all based on the same raw data, or mostly the same raw data. But each company is interpreting that data just a little bit differently to give you something a little bit different on the outside. So if you're interested in transferring, you can go to our website at yourdnaguide.com/transferring to learn how to download your data from each testing company. There's a little bit different procedure no matter where you're at, so you want to check our guide to make sure you know where to go. Our guide will also explain to you how to upload. Okay, so you download your data from your testing company, save it on your website. Then you have to go out to the new testing company, sign up for their free service, essentially, and then upload your results into their system. Now, one question I often get asked about transferring is which is better, to just transfer, like I've just explained, or to physically test with a company? So transferring is obviously cheaper, and that's the biggest factor for most people. But if you find a really good sale, or if you are wanting to know why you might want to physically test, the biggest reason to physically test with the company is to offer the opportunity for you to have your DNA banked or saved. I've been in this business a long time, really as long as there's been a genetic genealogy industry, I've been here, and I've seen a lot of companies come and go. And people have tested with these companies, and now where's their data? Where's their raw data? Where's their actual physical sample? Well, it's gone. It was destroyed. So testing with multiple companies kind of ensures that your physical DNA sample is still around somewhere and available for testing at a later time. So that's the first next step you might want to take, to transfer, to test at another company, to see what other companies have to offer in terms of DNA matches, as well as their ethnicity results. You also might want to try this strategy called Ask the Wife. So I go over this in my book, but very simply put, it's when you find a group of matches who have a common ancestor with each other, and you're trying to figure out how you share a common ancestor with them. So if you'll remember from part 2 of this series, so again, if you haven't watched it, go back because we're going to build on it now. In part 2, we talked about finding this group of matches, and this group of matches had a common ancestor of Morty Miller and Mildred Morrison. So they had a common ancestor with each other, and in part 2, we talked about how to find your generation of connection with them. And we decided that based on the amount of DNA you were sharing with these matches, you weren't a descendant of Mildred and Morty, but instead you were likely a descendant of Mildred and Morty's parents. That was your generation of connection. So if you can find the descendants of Mildred and Morty's parents, okay, you'll have your pool of ancestors that could be your ancestors, right? So let's talk about what that looks like. So if this is your pedigree chart, then you know that your generation of connection with these matches, again, based on the amount of DNA that you're sharing with them, goes back to your 2 times great-grandparents. But you have a lot of 2 times great-grandparents. How do we know which one belongs to the Mildred and Morty line? Well, we know because of the way we grouped our matches using shared matches in part 2. By the way we grouped them, we know that this Mildred and Morty connection belongs in this spot on our tree, which is fantastic because we're actually missing ancestors on this section of our tree. So our story is, this is our maternal grandfather. He was adopted, and we would like to know who his family is. So because we've identified a group of matches who share Mildred and Morty in common, and we found our generation of connection with them, this is what we're left with. We know we're connected at this yellow generation. We know this line has something to do with either Mildred's family or Morty's family. So drawn another way, we know that Mildred's parents are possibly our generation of connection, which means what? Which means one of the ancestors we are looking for is one of Mildred's siblings. Now, we don't know if it's Mildred or Morty. So it could be that we're a descendant of Morty's parents, right? Now, you can see I put a little X here. We know we're not Morty's descendant. How do we know that? We know that because our generation of connection with these matches was not Mildred and Morty. It was above them or before them or the generation before them. Okay? But look at how much we know. All you have to do is do some genealogy to find Morty's siblings, basically, right? But how will we know which one of Morty's siblings is our ancestor? What if there's a whole pile of kids? What if there's 13 or 14 of them? How could you possibly know which one of them was your ancestor? So the way we do this is to ask the wife. Okay, so you see Mildred and Morty now, right? This is Morty's family with his wife, Mildred. And you can see for each of his siblings, I've added a wife or a spouse, okay? I call it Ask the Wife because I think it sounds cooler, but really it's Ask the Spouse. Now think about this with me. You found a genetic network, a group of people in your DNA match list who share DNA with each other and who connect to Mildred and Morty, who's led you to this family. So what I'm telling you now is that to determine which of Morty's siblings is your ancestor, you need to ask the wife. You need to look in your DNA match list for another group, a genetic group of people that represents one of these spouses. So you'll recall in part 2, we had several groups. So we saw the group that connected to Mildred and Morty, but by looking at the spouses, we see that we have another group that connects to a spouse of one of Morty's siblings. Guys, when you really understand this concept and apply it, it is like magic almost. When you see this other genetic network in your DNA match list that corresponds to this spouse, you know you found your people. And it's really fun. Because what does this mean? It means that this particular sibling of Morty's and his spouse are the parents of your ancestor. Okay, now of course we'd still want to do genealogy to verify all of these things. There's a lot of work to do still, but it gives you this amazing hypothesis that you can then test out using genetics and genealogy. All right, so what's next for DNA strategies for 2022? Transferring and using that Ask the Wife. Oh, do you guys hear that? It's Alexa. Alexa, stop. Okay, now listen. I'm 12 minutes into this presentation already, and the really bad thing about recording is that I'm supposed to stop right now and like re-record it to make it perfect. But guys, come on, 12 and a half minutes. I'm not gonna redo that, okay? So I'm sorry that she interrupted us. We're just gonna keep going, okay? Because that's what we can do. So hopefully it makes you feel like we're just here together. There was an interruption, we're all live. Somebody came in, somebody's cell phone rang, it happens, right? Okay, let's move on. The last thing that we want to do is to do genealogy. All right, doing genealogy involves either doing your own genealogy or doing other people's genealogy. Now, this is where you're going to spend the bulk of your time, is doing other people's genealogy. Now, why do you need to do this? It's because you find a DNA match, you understand your generation of connection is at that third cousin level, that 2 times great grandparents, which means you're going to need to push this match's tree all the way back to their 2 times greats, so you can see their common ancestor with other people in the group. Now, there's a quick and easy way to do this. We call it quick and dirty trees or quick and simple trees. I talk about how to do this in my book, but the principle is that your DNA match's ancestor that they have listed in their very small tree is the same as an ancestor in, say, Jane genealogist's tree. Somebody who's done more work and researched more and pushed those trees back farther. So to find those trees quickly, you can actually do a search. So you can search on Family Search for free, no matter who you are. And if you have a subscription to Ancestry or MyHeritage, you can search their public member trees. So all you're doing is taking the name of the ancestor in your matches tree, throwing it into one of these systems and looking for more information. It helps you quickly build someone else's tree. Now, I can hear you kind of cringing. You're like, that's bad genealogy. And it is. But what you're looking for is a quick way to get an idea of who this match's people are, so you can better do the research you need to do and be more focused. Now, after, you'll want to do good genealogy to verify some of these connections, but at first, it's really all about a quick scan of someone else's tree to try and find that ancestor that they have in common with someone else on your match list. All right, so that was doing other people's genealogy. You'll also want to do your own. Now you're probably thinking, Diane, that's the whole reason I've turned to genetic genealogy is I've tried to do paper research and I can't find my ancestor. That's why I'm stuck. And I'm telling you, I don't want you to push your line back. I want you to bring your lines down. Doing descendancy research on the line that you're trying to find is the best way to move your research forward without the help of anyone else. Why? Because who are you going to find in these DNA databases? You're going to find your cousins, descendants of your ancestors. Most of us that spend so much time pushing our lines back, we don't think to come down. But that's how we find the names of our DNA matches. And that's how we identify people who've tested but maybe haven't posted a tree at all or have posted a very small tree. So do descendancy research. It's the best way to move your research forward when you're stuck on a brick wall and turning to DNA. All right, so those are the 3 next steps for 2022. Transfer, ask the wife, and do genealogy. And this ends our 3-part series on what to do with your DNA test results in 2022. For more DNA tips, check out these videos. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, you can do the DNA and we can help.